Hi, Dr. Joya. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Beth. It's great to be here.
I love your background. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, this was something that the NASA graphics artist did, and it's a Mars plant chamber. And this is one that actually could be launched on a rocket. It would be an entire module that would fit to other modules that are launched on a rocket and that could form a habitat. And so I sit at home in front of my kitchen and dream of being on Mars, surrounded by beautiful plants. So it makes me very happy.
It's beautiful just looking at it. Oh, my word. So it was so great to hear you earlier this week, where you shared with everyone who tuned in for this wonderful news conference announcing what would be in one of the cargo resupply missions that are going to ISS. Specifically, if I get it correct, it's SpaceX 26. Is that right?
That's correct. We are sending our Veg 05 payload, and this is our dwarf tomatoes. So this is red robin dwarf tomato seeds that I planted with my very own hands in our veggie plant pillows, which are space grow bags. And we have two sets of these to grow in two different veggies under different red to blue lighting. So the astronauts are going to install these probably in early December, add water and grow some tomatoes that they'll be harvesting then in the February March timeframe.
I love that. And I cannot wait to get into all the details. And especially, who doesn't love the words plant pillows? That just sounds really inviting. I love plant pillows.
They sound more snuggly than they are. These are really kind of a space grow bag. And, for veggie, we wanted a way to replicate how we grow plants here, like how we grow our house plants in pots, or how we may grow, a container garden on our patio. And so the veggie, it's a small growth chamber, and these pillows are they're a bag that contains the substrate that we put in there, which is a porous clay and a controlled release fertilizer, similar to how you might grow something on your patio. But specifically, the clay is kind of exciting because it's a porous ceramic that's the same material that's on the baseball fields between the bases. And this works really well in space because it traps air and water in the root zones.
I love that. Wow. I see NASA thinks of everything. Uh, okay, so I want to put a little bit of a hold on some more details of what's exactly going up, because everyone's going to want to know about the kind of tomatoes and more about the containing system. But first, let's talk about you and how you started your love for growing plants, and especially how did that mirror with your love for space exploration?
Yeah, I think I've loved plants pretty much my whole life. I remember being very young, and my the first tree I ever planted, I think I was two. I planted an avocado tree, which
Oh,
then bore fruit because I was born down in South Florida, and I grew up in Central Florida here. So it's a great place to be growing plants. We have plants all the time that are very green year round. My mother and grandmother were both avid horticulturalists, and I just liked them, but I never really thought much about them. But I took an agriculture class when I was 12 years old, at the junior high school at the time. And I took agriculture because I loved horses as
mhm,
well, as
mhm.
many young children do. And I wanted to learn more about horses. But while there, I realized I really liked horticulture. And my agriculture teacher was invited to Kennedy Space Center to do an educator professional development experience that they had to learn about the life support systems and the plant research that was going on. It was called, I believe, Energize the Green Machine. And
Mhm.
that's the work that NASA was doing even in the mid 1980s, when this occurred. And he came here and he took hours and hours of video. He had the handheld camcorder, and he brought back so much information to his classrooms. And just a shout out to all the teachers out there. When you bring this information in, it just can inspire your students. You'll have no idea how
Mm.
much influence it has. So thank you to teachers who go that extra mile, and thank you to my ag teacher, because it just set me a light for a future in this area.
And how old were you when this
I was
happened?
12. Yeah, I was 12.
12.
So
Wow. Oh my
yeah.
gosh. So
and
he,
and he was great. He also got inspired by it, and he started building, we built hydroponic systems, actually growing tomatoes in the junior high, fish
wow.
aquariums with styrofoam, and it was a lot of fun. He went on to get more into the fish farming side of things, which NASA was also doing some work on aquaculture at the time. And I went on to high school and continued to do hydroponics and had wonderful agriculture teachers there that supported me. I was in FFA and doing agri-science, and it was just so great to have these teachers who just threw their support behind
Yes.
me and let me explore my dreams.
Oh, I love that background. That's so great. I think that a lot of people can relate. A lot of gardeners, a lot of people who enjoy growing their own food, but also are space advocates and enthusiasts as well. Let's
Yes.
talk about now how you came into NASA. Was that something that was always your goal, or had you approached it throughout your academics and more teachers encouraged you to apply this in a really unique way?
I kind of think of it like the old version of Super Mario Brothers, where you had these little plus ups periodically. And
Oh,
I had these little plus ups along the way. So I had, these wonderful supportive teachers. Then I decided, okay, this is what I want to do. I went to do undergraduate research, or undergraduate education at Cornell, and I studied plant science, but I also got to do a NASA internship as an undergraduate. And so that was another, like, one of those mushrooms that makes you jump to the next level. It's been a
yeah.
long time since I played video games, so that could be completely dated information. Um,
No, I got
but
you. I'm
oh,
right
you
there
got
with
it?
you.
You got it?
Yep. Ding.
Okay.
Insert. I'll try to search the database for the sound
Boom, boom,
effects.
boom. Yeah.
Ding.
And then as a graduate student, I wanted to, work more in this. So I studied more how plants sense and respond to gravity. But then I also got to go back as a counselor for the internship program here at Kennedy Space Center.
Wow.
And I got to do a space shuttle experiment to do seed germination testing. It didn't work. It failed miserably, but
Oh,
we learned a lot. And that was when I realized I loved to build things. I liked to help design the systems, and I love to work with the engineers who are doing all of this hardware. That was just so eye-opening for me because I was always very mechanical, and I like putting things together. Then after graduate school at Penn State, I did a postdoc at Purdue as part of a NASA Center of Research and Training in Advanced Life Support. And
oh,
so that was
wow.
another one of those plus ups and, boom, up to the
Yeah.
next level, where I got to work with other researchers looking at, food production and waste recycling, waste remediation, and water and air remediation, and putting the whole systems together. And that was just magical. I had a wonderful advisor there who had worked with NASA for many years, and we studied LED lighting for crop growth.
Cool.
And I was doing horticulture. I was in the horticulture department. So that was great. And I got, just to go to conferences, to talk to people in this field. And when an opportunity for another postdoctoral position at Kennedy Space Center opened up, I mean, I'd been in school a very long time.
Yeah.
It's really like, I'd really like a real job at some point, but I really wanted to be here. So I was very fortunate to get an opportunity to be a postdoc at Kennedy to work on the Veggie system before it launched to space and help optimize it from a horticultural perspective, help select crops and growing systems, and look at the environment. And then I was even more, blessed, fortunate to be selected as a NASA project scientist when an opportunity opened
Oh,
up.
so
So
wonderful. So,
yeah.
question, what was it
Mhm.
like going from the Florida environment to the Purdue? Because I mean, from the plants and the cold, were you prepared for
Yeah.
that?
Well, I was doing, stepwise. So first I went to Ithaca, New York, to
Oh,
Cornell, and then Penn State, and then Purdue. So I had 18 years in Florida, and it was kind of flat and very hot, and I wasn't super happy. And then I went up north, and I got snow and rocks and waterfalls and trees and lots of winter. And then I got lots more winter. And so I had about 18 years up there. And then I was really ready to come back to
I
Florida. I was
bet. I
very
bet.
excited.
Yes. Oh,
Yes.
but that's so great. I mean, I have family in Texas. And
Mhm.
so I'm always asking my mother-in-law, like, what's that? What's that? And they have different, like, trees have smells, right? And they have
Mhm.
different, so even just being there, like when it's this time of year up here in the Midwest, when I go on the bike trail, I smell the birch. And birch has a
Mm.
very distinct smell. As a matter of fact, it's
Right.
so sought after right now because people want to put birch into their fireplaces because it
Oh,
has such
yeah.
an aromatic, right? And
Mhm.
so when I'm on the bike trail, I know when I'm passing a birch tree, which is crazy, but it's also wonderful to be in tune to that. And then when I go down south, I'm like, what is that smell? And they're like, that's cedar. It's a heavy
Mm.
smell. And every now and then, like, I'll never forget, oh, you'll love this story if I may share. I'll never
Please.
forget my first time at space camp in Huntsville, Alabama. And there was two fragrances. The first
Mhm.
one was so beautiful and floral. And it was my first ever encounter with a magnolia tree,
Oh,
which
aren't they
was
the
like,
best?
those
Yeah.
blooms are like as big as your head. They're just
Mhm.
huge. And so this wafting, like sweet smell was coming through the air and the sweltering, hot, sticky air. And I'm just like, how wait, and Houston is also sweltering and hot, but not as sweet smelling. So there was that. And then as we were like out and about in the field, because we had field work and rocket launches out in space camp and stuff, the grass had a smell that I've never smelled before. And it was like really pungent and it was sassafras.
Oh, wow.
I know. And I'm
That's
like, wait a
cool.
minute, root beer? And they're like,
Yeah.
yeah, in the grass. So yeah, I love when you can go to a different place and experience, the environment around you through your senses. I'm sure that's wonderful for you as
It's
well.
it's so yeah, it's so individual and so unique, and every place is different, and that's actually one of the things that we think a lot about for the plants for
Yeah.
space is the
Yes.
sensory environment and how the plants might enhance the sensory experience. I mean, it's not just food, but plants are such a part of our memories and walking outside and seeing green things, and some people just see a generalized green. We call that plant blindness. But other people see, individual flowers and leaves and having that and or not having that for a
Yeah.
long period of time
Yes.
could really impact people's health and well-being. So
Truly.
we're trying to investigate that a little. And I have all these wonderful photographs of astronauts sniffing plants because apparently the space station maybe doesn't smell all that great all the time.
What?
But they love smelling, the produce and when they harvest the produce. And I have a whole collection of these images actually of different astronauts,
Yeah.
smelling the plants that, and they say when you open like the veggie chamber or the door of the advanced plant habitat, or take down the veggie bellows, it's like being in the produce section of a grocery store. And for
I
me, that
bet.
was just really, eye-opening. It was
Oh
like,
my
wow, I
gosh.
hadn't thought about it. So
Well, I'm so glad that NASA has you and has the innovative team that you work with to help us develop what will and can best serve us in space. So, if you wouldn't mind, walk us through not only some of your favorites that have flown, or
mm,
maybe some that have been really successful, or what the astronauts wish they really had, because
mm.
I'm sure there's like, it's just like on vacation. You wish you had, a certain set of comfy pajamas or something of creature comforts from home, but then
Mm.
there's what's possible because there's a weight and there's a volume and there's all kinds of things that keep you from bringing everything you want on your vacation when you're away from home. So in space, that same challenge is there. So is there something that astronauts really want? And then is there some things that you've seen fly and it did so well that you're like perfection. This will be a great space based plant.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do ask the crew, would you like ornamentals or edible crops? And we've asked them this from the very beginning with the veggie system. We've primarily grown leafy greens in
Okay.
veggie. We did grow the zinnia flowers once, as many people might remember the zinnia flowers. Scott Kelly,
Yes.
harvested
Yeah.
these. He made the most beautiful bouquet
That's my
on
favorite background
Valentine's
picture.
Day. Oh, it's
Yeah.
wonderful. I love it too. But
Mm.
that was, oh, it was so stressful. The we we had airflow issues, we had fungus, we had, you name it, we
Oh,
had it happen with that mission. But then they started blooming and it was just such a game changer, and everybody forgot about all the horrible stress we'd have with like the airflow and the fungus. And then it was just like, we have gorgeous flowers in space. And I think mostly the astronauts say they want food. They want things that they can eat. Now, this is different culturally. When the Russian astronauts or Russian cosmonauts were asked this, they often said they wanted ornamentals, and they've flown ornamentals on several previous, their Mir space station as well. But our astronauts almost always say they want food. But then when something like the flowers happened, they just had a great time, growing those flowers and making the bouquet. So I think we try to pick very attractive edible plants that makes
yeah.
everybody happy. But there are certain things that just aren't super feasible. We've had astronauts ask for things like corn, and corn, even dwarf corn, it's just too large to
Yeah.
grow in space. We don't have any cooking capability really on the International Space Station. There's a food warmer, but it doesn't really cook. It kind of, you can wilt your leafy greens, but it doesn't get above, a temperature that would be, safe to touch. And so we don't really, we have hot water, and that's about it. So we're primarily picking crops that can be picked and eaten fresh. So things like corn, you can eat raw corn, but most corn is just too big.
Mm.
I've had students ask for, hey, can we do pumpkins in space? And I'm like, oh, those are really big plants, and they grow everywhere, and you've got vines. And I mean, I think it would be awesome to sort of, have vines wrapped all around the space station, but probably not super feasible. But then some crops, obviously, NASA has grown wheat many times. Many of our investigators have grown wheat, and wheat's a great, very productive crop, but you're not going to be threshing and milling and grinding it and making bread
Yeah.
anytime soon. We'd have to send a lot of different equipment for that. So that'll be farther down the road when we're on the planetary surface, like the moon or Mars.
Oh, wow. I can imagine
Yeah.
though, the environment is so sterile and so white and so clear and void of vibrant colors and fresh aromatic smells. So I would love a viney plant taking over. Like,
Mm.
imagine if instead of like moving the Velcro all the time and all the equipment, you have to move a vine to get to the buttons. It would
I know,
feel like
something like
home.
morning glories growing around.
Oh, that'd be so
Yeah,
pretty
it
and
would be
great.
great. It's interesting because you say it's sterile, but it's actually, from a biological perspective, it's very not sterile, but
Oh,
it's
yeah.
very synthetic, So I like the word synthetic more because it's all
Synthetic.
plastic and metals and cables, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of biology up there because
Oh,
there's
I bet.
microbes,
20
all
plus
over.
years worth of biology up
Hmm.
there.
Yeah, think about the microorganisms in your kitchen or bathroom, and then think about, yeah, long duration. So,
Oh gosh. Oh, I don't
there's
want to think about that at all.
well, it's fascinating though, because this is a plant-human microbial ecosystem or a microbiome, and we're learning more about that all the time as well too, and trying to understand how do we get a healthy ecosystem in these closed environments. Now, light would be a real challenge for your morning glory or our pumpkins growing all around because the lighting on space station outside of hardware like the Veggie, it's for human vision, and so it's an order of magnitude lower than plants need for kind of minimal survival.
Okay.
um, even less maybe, because your eyes are very good at adapting to that light, and so there's light and you're like, oh, there's plenty of light, and you watch The Martian, and they're growing potatoes, Matt Damon grew potatoes in the habitat. Oh, there's plenty of light, but that wouldn't be enough light. And so we use very bright lights, very high intensity LED lights for our plant growth, because plants need higher light to do photosynthesis. And that's why when you grow outside, often on a bright sunny day, you put on sunglasses because
Mhm.
that light is very bright. And that's what plants are used to. So, so the light on the space station probably wouldn't be enough, but it would be still very cool to just have them growing everywhere, I think.
Yeah. And please expand. You talked a little bit on the press conference about the two different kinds of lights. Why the two?
Well, for this Veggie 5 experiment, we're using the capabilities of the Veggie chamber, and Veggie has red, blue, and green LEDs. And as most of your listeners probably know, plants do photosynthesis, which means they're taking up the light energy from the sun or from electric lights, and they're capturing that and using that light energy to capture carbon dioxide into carbohydrates. And a byproduct of this is that oxygen gets produced. So this is why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
That photosynthesis exists is the reason that pretty much all of the rest of life on this planet is here. And it's a wonderful, amazing process. And we have a lot of different researchers researching how does that differ in space. What we're doing with Veggie 5 is we're looking at the red to blue light ratio in Veggie. So red and blue are common wavelengths of light that will help power photosynthesis. Plants can use a lot of different colors of light, but they primarily are using a lot of red and blue, and they tend to reflect light a little more in the green, and that's why plants look green. And if you have green light on, like we also have some green lights in Veggie, then the plants will look green. If you don't have the green lights on, the plants kind of look gray and purple, which isn't the
Really?
most appealing color of a plant. So
Really?
you need those green wavelengths or white light. You need some sort of green wavelengths for plants to look like plants. It's also
Wow.
really important to have the green, when you're taking photographs, when you're trying to diagnose plant health, to know, oh, is it got any nutrient deficiencies? Or for tomatoes, when you're trying to figure out, if the fruit are ripe, you really need those components, because our eyes see the best in the green. But plants use the red and blue a lot. And so we're going to have different levels of red and blue light. And we want to test and see if the response to that light differs between space and ground.
Mm.
And plants are so sensitive to their light environment and to all of their environment, because they can't run away, like us. We're animals. We can run away if it's too cold, too hot, too dark, too light. We can change our environment or leave it. But plants can't leave it, so they have to adapt. And we call this phenotypic plasticity. You
Ah.
can grow plants under lots of different environmental conditions, and their outputs, the shape of their leaf, the size of their plant, the chemicals that they make, the amount of fruit, all of those outputs are going to differ depending on what the inputs are from the environment. And light is a really, really big one in plants. They're essentially beings, developed to live in light. And so we can change that light environment and get different responses. And there's a lot of great plant science all over the world now studying this, because we have these tools, light emitting diodes and custom adjustable light fixtures now. So we can
Wow.
do this incredible research that we couldn't even do before, a few years ago. So
That's
it's been a
amazing.
very exciting field to be in, because there's new things every conference you go to, or every journal that you pick up. There's these great new articles saying, oh wow, if you change this type of light spectrum, the plants will do this differently. And so it's pretty exciting.
Wow. Now, it's always a challenge, I bet, to um, decide what goes or decide what gets to be studied. How does
Mhm.
that process work? Do people have to really position themselves to, like, or do the astronauts get to select, or does it depend if there's someone on that particular crew who may be a biologist? Is that all go into the selection process?
There's a lot of different factors that go into play. And so this particular study was a grant. So this was a grant from the Human Research Program, which is a
Okay.
NASA program, with a support also from NASA's Space Biology Program. So it was kind of a collaborative grant from both programs. And this was, in response to a proposal that I and my colleagues wrote several years ago now, saying these would be important questions to answer in space. And so the way things work with NASA puts out calls for proposals, whether they're under space biology or human research or other areas. And the scientists like myself, work with their teams and answer the calls, trying to, say, I do this science, it's going to meet NASA's needs because it'll answer these interesting questions. Then there's what's called peer review. So NASA assembles a board of external people who have no involvement in who has responded to this in that particular call. And they read these grants and decide, which ones seem to make the most sense from a scientific perspective, which ones are going to get the best return for the science. And so the peer review committee basically, evaluates all the different proposals and decides which ones NASA should fund. Then we have an internal group at NASA that does a technical evaluation to look at, okay, we have this great science that the peer community says this is the science that needs to be done. Now we have to see which is feasible. What can we actually do with our hardware, with our systems? And we get both of those data back, and then the program administrators at NASA decide which grants they're going to fund. And so that's how it works basically all through through NASA and through other government agencies. This is how taxpayer funded research gets decided, because we want to make sure that we're giving the American taxpayer, I'm an American taxpayer, you're an American taxpayer, we want to make sure that we're giving you the best bang for your buck, and doing something that's really worthwhile. So it's not just a personal project that somebody is doing or something. This is really really very well vetted kind of science. And then but then there's all sorts of other factors. You have to do what's called science definition. So you have to answer a bunch of questions before you even get approved to move on to flight. So you have to figure out, well, how long can our seeds be stored? What light conditions do we actually want to test? How do things grow in this environment? And you do a lot of ground research, whether it's at your lab at a university or at NASA, if it's a NASA project. And then you move through a series of kind of gateways where we have to see, will the science work in NASA's hardware as we expect? Do we have to change anything? Do we need to change the fertilizer because the plants aren't growing big enough? Or how about the harvest days? Do we want to harvest on these days we thought we would? Or, in our actual hardware, maybe they grow faster. And so we answer all those questions, and we come up with procedures, and we have a whole team that works on this, that basically gets this experiment ready for the astronauts to do. And then, this one is kind of a little more unique in that we have this big science component that's plant science, but we also have a human research component where we have human subjects who are consenting to be test subjects for this, to give feedback on how having the plants in their environment makes them feel, psychological feedback, or on the flavor, a taste test feedback. And so that also is worked by a whole nother group. And, I gave informed consent briefings to the astronauts before they fly. And I said, this is the research we're doing. Here's a study that you have the option to participate in if you would like to. We will really value your opinions on these and the data that you can help generate. So like any subjects, you get the option to refuse and say, no, I don't want to do that. But luckily, we've been very fortunate. The astronauts are extremely excited to do this. And so we're getting lots of wonderful data from them.
I can imagine what a joy it is for you to also see across the board how every human, right, is interested in having this on board. And it's funny, like a test pilot, like Scott Kelly, a different type of career. And then I believe Dr. Kate Rubins is a microbiologist.
She is,
so it's like you've got, and they're both equally excited to like get into the plants and work with the plants, because again, it's like going out into your garden or your backyard. Everyone can relate to a day at work where you're in an environment that's for work and focus. But then when you get back outside or step outside your back door into the garden or environment, you just breathe a little lighter and enjoy the day a little bit more. It just kind of grounds you. And I bet that also happens in space. We talk a lot about the overview effect of looking back at our precious, beautiful Earth. But I bet just for a moment, getting into the plants and the experiments and having that freshness and ability to take that in sensory would be like an overview effect. And I know it certainly is for, I'm sure you've reviewed, or looked at studies where people are in isolation from plants, not
Hmm.
just in space, but in other areas and locations like analog astronauts and
Right.
people who are in deserts or areas where it's not a heavy plant-based area,
Hmm.
or even in water for days and on ships where there is
Yeah,
not a lot of
submarines
vegetation.
and yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
it's impressive. And I think like with the space station, they get to at least look out on Earth and see,
yeah.
this beautiful planet underneath. But as we go to Mars, they're not going to have that at all. And so I think it's
Mm.
going to be even more important to have that little piece of green growing Earth with you in those environments.
So what is your favorite plants, either to fly in space or at home?
Wow.
It's
That's
loaded.
such a tough question. I could spend hours on it, but one that I actually really enjoyed growing is sweet potato. This is a super fun crop plant to grow because it is
Yeah.
a vine. It's in the morning glory family. It's a vine, but it's also like really hard to kill. Which is, I'm even though I'm a plant
That's my
scientist,
kind of plant.
I could
Yep.
kill a lot of plants, but this one is just super fun. The vines are very resistant. You can just take a cutting of it and put in the ground and it'll start a whole new plant. and
Really?
and it also it sort of likes to be slightly abused, maybe is the wrong word, but like the roots, if you put them in a smaller container, they'll actually produce more sweet potato roots. Like they'll rip open, a smaller container. If you put them in a big
Wow.
luxurious container, they don't produce any sweet potato roots. So they're a real interesting one that I had a lot of fun growing. And I like, we would train the vines around the little like cones and cylinders, just to see if we could get them into a smaller volume,
Oh,
because again,
cool.
space is limited. So that was a lot of fun. But at home, I have a mango tree that I rigorously
Mm.
defend from squirrels and raccoons. I've gotten to the point where I've had to put an electric fence around it to
Oh boy.
keep my mangoes, because otherwise they just get eaten by various non-discerning rodents. So um, they're like, "Oh, it's green. I'm going to try another one. Oh, it's green." I'm like, "No, stop eating my mango." So
Oh, right.
yeah, it's a bit of a silent warfare here. But
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Well, one of the things we enjoyed so much on one of our analog missions was growing radishes. And we
Mm,
specifically picked them because at the time, Kate Rubins was growing radishes
right.
on ISS. Now,
Yes.
personally, I hate radishes. I don't know. I will not eat a radish, but to have something so peppery and so, I don't want to say spicy. I think a radish tastes like radish differently to other people, but it's kind of
Hmm.
like that. Remember when the shoe came out and there was like, is it gray or is it white? And everyone was like, it's white. And everyone else was like, it's gray. So I
Right.
know I do understand that different plants and vegetables taste different. But for us, growing the radishes was interesting. And if I may, it was
Hmm.
like, let's try it over here at the window. Like anyone would just by default put a plant near the natural light. And we only had two
Right.
windows in the whole habitat.
Hmm.
Well, the window turned out to be too cold, believe it or
Right.
not. Yeah, we
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
at that
Yeah.
altitude. So we had to move it around. And the only place in which it worked was under the lights, having the lights on at all times,
Mm.
artificial lights, not the natural light from the rest of
Hmm.
the habitat. And that's the only way we grew our plants. But radishes were well chosen because it worked both here in the Midwest at my home, and then I brought them to the analog and they grew. And then it was a joy to watch Dr. Kate grow them on station as well. So
Yes.
that was really fun. And such a nice little sprouting little easy to also not kill.
Yeah, they're pretty reliable and they're quick and yeah, they're a
Yeah.
lot of fun to grow. Yeah,
Yeah. And
definitely.
I can imagine that, we hear this often that the palate of the astronauts want things that are full flavor and very
Hmm.
spicy or have a lot because of the change in their palate when they're up there.
Hmm.
So like an onion, have we grown any onions or anything like that that is a strong type of hatch chilies, right? In the
Yeah,
last
we did hatch chilies and we did wasabi mustard. That one was quite spicy as
really?
well. But yeah, the Espanola improved hatch chilies. Yeah, the Russians actually bring up onions and then they let them sprout and they eat the onion greens. So that's something that
Wow.
they've traditionally done. But yeah, the chili peppers were definitely one of the spicier crops that we did. And then the astronauts had the space tacos. The wasabi mustard was also pretty spicy. I think some of the astronauts didn't like it so much, but others said it was fabulous with the shrimp cocktail. So
Ah,
that's one of the really fun things is whenever we have fresh produce growing up there, they get everything out of their pantry and they mix and match and try all these different combinations. And we get to hear about, oh, hey, I made lobster salad lettuce wraps, or, they did the tacos with the chili peppers. They've done cheeseburgers with the lettuce on top. And um, they came up with a formula for taking we had baby bok choy, extra dwarf bok choy that was very successful. And they put, I believe it was liquid garlic and soy sauce on and kind of put
ooh,
it in an used tortilla pack, an empty package, and put it in the food warmer and just sort of wilted it. And they said it was a great side dish. So
that does
yeah,
sound good.
they're very creative with
Do
all the
you
things
or
they
the
do.
team ever get to have a bite or get to try anything they bring back home, or is that not possible?
No, we bring them back frozen. So they come
Oh,
back frozen at minus 80 degrees Celsius, so very frozen. And we do that for a couple of reasons. So we're bringing back, a sample from each of the missions. Excuse me. And so we need to look at the microbial food safety of this produce
mm.
and also the nutritional composition of it. So, for Veggie 5, the astronauts will get to eat half of the tomatoes and the other half we'll bring back. And we do a lot of analysis on that, but it all comes back frozen and lettuce frozen, not so appealing. So we don't really feel too bad that we don't get to eat any of it. The tomatoes probably break a tooth on if you try.
Oh, I see, I see. Oh my goodness. So now let's go back. I'd love to ask you about the containers and the
Mhm.
way they're going to grow. You were so descriptive before, and I think it's fascinating. And I want to ask specifically, um, are we looking to have these containers designed and implemented for now for station or long term for Mars? So in other words, are these going to be like a similar design or something very close so that they can be literally like you? I think you actually described them as a not a plug and play, but like a dropping what it was something like really cute, like just water and
Yeah,
go.
water and go. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This is what we're doing now. So
Okay.
this is really to sort of show proof of concept with our veggie chamber and our advanced plant habitat where the radishes were grown has a similar substrate, but the plant pillows in veggie, as I said, they're kind of a grow bag. It's a Teflon coated Kevlar type material with a fabric bottom, a Nomex wicking bottom surface, and it's a really nice design because it's all very compact. We fill them up with the substrate and the fertilizer, and we put some wicks in there to glue the seeds into, and then the wicks help transfer water when the astronauts add water. And that water helps kind of establish a water column. And then when the plant grows, it takes over that function of transmitting water from the roots, through the shoots, through transpiration, evaporating the water out of the leaves. Um, but these are, they're not, they're kind of a one use disposable approach at this point. So it's not sustainable. And we need to become more sustainable with how we're growing crops in the
I
future.
see.
So we're doing a lot of work on that. Because if we can grow and live sustainably in space, then maybe we can do it all here on Earth as
Yeah.
well. So we have to definitely figure all of that out. And we have a number of folks who are working on different water and nutrient delivery approaches for space crop growth in the future to become more sustainable. The other things we've got to figure out are recycling. We're not going to be eating the stems and leaves and roots of our tomatoes. And that's a lot of nutrients that are locked up in those. So for now, for space station, it's easy to send things up and send fertilizer and seeds and substrates and everything else. But ultimately, if we want to be more Earth independent as we move in the direction of living, on the surface of the moon and on the surface of Mars, we have to figure out how to recycle all these things. So composting, which many people who are listening, I'm sure, do composting, or you can use biocharcoal formation, combustion of that material. You can leach using water to leach nutrients out. There are a lot of different approaches to getting those nutrients out of that inedible plant material. But then we have to figure out how to also dose correctly to get them back in to grow the next set of
Mm.
tomatoes. And so it's figuring the whole system out and how to put that all together and be more sustainable. That's part of what we're doing. So the plant pillows are for now, but moving forward, we're going to be doing a lot more sustainable approaches as we figure them all
Oh,
out.
that's great. So exciting. Yes. One of the things you mentioned on the conference that I'd love to end with is how you're inviting everyone to participate in helping, and especially the kiddos. You talked about how they are able to design the logo for this mission. So
Yes.
if you could point us to where they can go and do that, that would be so great.
Yes, yes. This is part of a national challenge we have with our partners at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden in Miami.
Oh,
And so this is a botanic garden that has developed what's called Growing Beyond Earth. And so this is a really cool program that we've worked with them. They have actually middle schools and high schools all around the US helping NASA to select crops for space with this Growing Beyond Earth program. We've got a lot of students doing it right now. If you go to Twitter at Grow Beyond Earth, you can see all these different schools that are helping select new crops and new growing techniques. And as part of this, we've developed this national challenge to design the next mission patch. So
oh,
if you go to, science and education at Fairchild Garden. So fairchildgarden.org, science and education,
okay.
the national challenge next mission patch. I can send you the link, but
That'd be
yeah, we
great.
need
I'll put it in the
need
show
entries
notes.
by we need entries by November 28th. So people still have some time.
Okay.
And then we will be here, I'll throw it in the chat. We will
Thank
be
you.
actually helping, our team and a lot of folks at NASA will be judging these different entries. So we can't wait to see what all these creative students
Perfect.
come up with. And this is open for pre-K to, 12. So
Oh, good,
any
good.
ages. Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to see what that patch is gonna look like and end
Me
up with.
neither. I'm very excited.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
if teachers and students are interested in doing this type of research in the future, if you go to the Growing Beyond Earth website at Fairchild, there's a place to find out more information and maybe sign up for the future. We're adding new schools
Perfect.
up all the time. We have around
Oh, good.
360 schools participating right now. So it's
Okay. Oh,
wonderful.
that's perfect. Well, Dr.
Mhm.
Joya, if the students and if there's not a student or a kiddo listening, but we want to get better at sustaining ourselves, and not everyone has access to a garden, and not everyone can, have a backyard garden. But what are some things we can do, just like the astronauts and just like you and your work, that can help us take care of better, be better stewards for the earth and grow things maybe in unique ways or support people like you?
Well, I think in general, we can all think a lot about where our food comes from, and think about trying to make good decisions about the food. Eating healthy food, bioavailable food is really important, nutritious thing. Trying new things, which is
What?
great. Yeah, try new things. Make it a point every time you go to the grocery store. Try one new vegetable that you've never tried before. Look
Oh,
up look up new recipes for how to make that. And I think just giving us suggestions for new things that we should try too. We're always welcoming those. But these are red robin tomatoes that we're going to be growing in space, and you
okay.
can just order those seeds online, the red robin tomatoes, and learn how to grow them. My colleague Jacob Torres has also developed something that everybody can do, which is the Space Chili Grow a Pepper Plant Challenge. So
Ooh,
if you look up Space Chili,
okay.
you can sign up and he can send seeds, and you can grow the chili peppers and put in data on how you're growing those chili peppers. And this is people all around the world. Jacob has developed this activity for. It's really remarkable. He
Oh,
has a
how
very active
fun.
online community of pepper growers, and if you think of crops that we should be growing that we may not know about, get that information to us. But we're all learning, all of us, and so indoor gardening, indoor farming, it's got a lot of overlaps with space farming. So whether you're growing things in a giant vertical farm warehouse or in your window in your bedroom,
Yeah,
you can learn from those, and NASA can learn from you. So I totally believe in citizen science,
great.
and getting lots of help with that.
Oh my goodness. Well, we are so grateful that you shared so much of what you're working on, what the astronauts get to grow and experience, and what's in our future to help us become Earth independent, I think you said was such a great word.
That's our
And
goal.
it's hard to
Yeah.
imagine because I particularly like our Earth and every tree and things around us. And
Yes,
this,
most of us don't. Most of us do. But it's always good to develop new approaches and skills to be able to be more sustainable, no
sure.
matter where we are, because it's only going to benefit all of us back here on Earth.
Well said. Well, thank you so much for your time today and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Beth. It's just been a wonderful pleasure.
You bet.